Warning: contains somewhat mature content, including language, brief violence, and mild sexual themes, and may not be suitable for people under age 14.
When they stepped onto the other side, Cho saw a pair of humongous white doors, larger than Reitan's. From what she could tell, they were in a castle of some sort. On either side of the white doors were 2 demon guards identical to Reitan's, except they were crimson in color. They even had spears. Reitan pulled Cho over to the doors, and the guard stood taller, not bowing.
"You are expected, Captain,"
said one, and the 2 opened the doors simultaneously. Reitan led Cho in quickly. Inside was a huge silver throne and an even bigger demon sitting in it. The demon's skin looked reptilian, but was a mixture of black and scarlet. It had huge horns and 4 glowing orange eyes, and was holding a huge staff in its clawed hand. The room in which the demon sat was pure white. The ceiling and the walls were a slick white marble, as well as the tiles making the floor. The demon sat forward slightly when Reitan and Cho entered, the huge doors banging shut behind them. Reitan came close to the demon, stopping only a few yards away and kneeling on the floor, bowing low. Cho hadn't realized Reitan was bowing and was too busy staring at the huge monster in front of her. "Cho!" Reitan hissed to her, tugging at her skirt briefly. Cho gasped and bowed low to the floor as well. The demon in the throne laughed lowly, watching them.
"What is this you have brought me, Reitan?"
he asked in a booming voice. Reitan raised his head only slightly to look at the demon. "I have brought His Majesty Dracus another human, sir," said Reitan, obvious fear in his voice.
"What for? I need no human besides you,"
said Dracus, amused.
"This girl, Cho, she took out one of my soldiers," Reitan replied. "She has no demonic power. All she had was a simple katana."
Dracus looked at Cho closely, who raised her head to look back. Cho trembled slightly, becoming intimidated. Dracus snapped his fingers loudly and the doors opened again.
"Sir, you called?"
said one of the guards from outside.
"Yes,"
said Dracus.
"I would like you to give this human girl your spear, and fight with her."
Reitan gasped, and Dracus smiled.
"To the death."
Cho's eyes widened, and she began to tremble. She looked quickly to Reitan, who had stood up.
"Sir, you can't do this!"
Dracus raised a hand, and a ball of black lightning emitted from his palm and shocked Reitan. He was thrown against the wall at the back of the room. Cho stood up, nearly crying in fear, staring at her wounded keeper. Dracus laughed.
"Why can't I?"
he said maliciously.
"You said she took out one of your soldiers. Surely she is more than capable of taking out one of mine."
The guard demon shoved the spear into Cho's hands, and she stumbled backward slightly. Reitan lifted his head to watch, face paler than normal. The guard took a stance. Even though it wasn't much taller than her, it still made Cho feel very small. Cho shakily held up her spear and closed her eyes for a moment. She tried to remember exactly what had gone through her mind when she was fighting off Reitan's demon. She had never taken any martial arts or sword fighting classes, so her managing to kill that demon was mainly the work of pure fear and adrenaline. If that was the case, then surely a matter of life and death would trigger that again, right? Cho's thoughts were interrupted by booming footsteps running towards her, and Reitan shouting her name. Cho's eyes flashed open just in time to see the demon guard raise a clawed hand ready to slash her. Her heart pounded in her throat as she raised the spear up to block the attack. The demon's hand hit the spear hard, but didn't break it. Cho thrust her weight into her arms and shoved the demon away with the spear, jumping back away from it. The demon skidded across the marble tile, its clawed feet creating a horrible high-pitched screeching noise, like nails scratching a chalkboard. It growled angrily at being denied the perfect attack, and charged forward towards Cho again. Cho's eyes widened, and she did a kind of 360-degree spin to the left, evading the demon gracefully. The demon skidded to a halt, growling and looking around to find where Cho had gone, only to find that Cho had jumped onto its back. The demon roared louder than ever, seeming to shake the entire castle, forcing Cho to fall off and onto the floor. The demon turned to her and took a deep breath. Cho had no idea what was about to happen, but she didn't want to wait around to find out. She rolled her body away and stood up quickly, just in time to see the demon breathe some kind of acid-green fire at the tile, burning a huge hole in it.
"Ah,"
said Dracus, amused.
"See what you did, girl?
You made him wreck my beautiful tile.
Cho glared at Drakus, then looked back at the demon. It had taken another deep breath, about to aim more acid fire at her. Cho looked to the floor beneath the demon, her brain working furiously to make up a plan. She smirked, looking back to the demon's face, timing herself and waiting for it to shoot at her. The demon opened its mouth, and right as the acid fire came shooting out, Cho ran towards it and flung herself backwards upon the floor so that she was sliding on her back towards the demon. As she was about to pass between the demon's legs, she jabbed the spear right into its chest. Cho slid under the demon, slowing to a halt. She sat up and looked to see blood gushing out of the demon's chest. It screamed and fell to the floor, shriveling up and moving no more. As Cho sighed in relief, Raiden ran over to her, hugging her tightly. Cho blinked a few times, feeling moisture on her neck and shoulder where his face was resting. "Are you crying?" Cho asked. Raiden wiped his face quickly, then looked at her.
"No, of course not," he said. "My eyes were just watering because of the pain from hitting the wall."
There was a slow clapping from the silver throne, and they both looked at Drakus.
Bravo,
he said, grinning evilly.
And here I thought you were just talk, and Reitannite was trying to save your disgusting human hide. Alas, I was wrong.
Cho shivered, and Raiden held her tighter.
I will let her live, Reitannite,
Drakus continued.
However, you must train her. She must be in good enough shape to join your army within 3 months, when we begin the invasion.
Cho furrowed her brow and looked up to Raiden. "Invasion?" she asked, but Raiden silenced her.
"Yes, sir. May I have your permission to transfer demon power to her like you did with me?"
Drakus thought a minute, then nodded.
Yes,
he said.
We can't have a useless human aiding us. You may go.
Raiden stood up and hurriedly led Cho out of the room. Cho opened her mouth to say something, but Raiden had opened a portal and she was dragged inside, and back to his room. Cho looked up at Raiden, then suddenly felt very tired and weak, falling to the floor. She just realized how much energy she had used in that fight. Raiden bent down and lifted her from the floor, then set her in the bed. He sat on the edge of it and sighed, putting his face in his hands. Cho watched him for a while. "Raiden," she finally said, "what was Drakus talking about when he said, 'invasion'?" Raiden slowly looked at her, then sighed again, not meeting her eyes.
"He was talking about the invasion of the human world,"
he replied sadly. Cho gasped. "What?" she shouted, sitting up quickly. "I can't help with that! Tomoko is up there! There are innocent lives in the human world! We can't just go up there and harm people who have done nothing wrong!" Raiden turned to her, placing his palm gently on her cheek.
"Calm down," he said. "It's either you help us, or you get killed."
"I'd rather die than to kill innocent people," said Cho angrily.
"I don't want to do it any more than you do, Cho," said Raiden, raising his voice. "But what choice do we have? Besides," he looked away from her, "there are people up there who deserve to be killed."
Cho sighed, looking to her lap, then back to him. "I agree, but there are also people who don't. Think about it. There are more people up there who know the human race is insignificant. There are people who wish that humans weren't so greedy, cruel, and ignorant. People like us, Raiden."
"I know,"
said Raiden, looking back at her.
"But what do you think will happen if I try telling that to Drakus? He'd kill me. Demons have no mercy. They don't understand."
"But what if," Cho began slowly, "what if you tell him that there are more humans up there like us? Humans Drakus could use in the army and help with the invasion. Would he at least spare them then?" Raiden thought.
I'm not sure," he said. "I suppose it's worth a shot. I hope this doesn't kill me."
Cho lay down again, staring at the ceiling. Raiden moved closer to her, his face hovering over hers. She blinked.
"You can't come with me to ask him, though,"
he said. "Well, why not?" asked Cho angrily.
"Because this is very dangerous," said Raiden. "If this doesn't work and he kills me, he'll kill you right on the spot."
Cho glared. "Well, If you make me stay here, I might just escape. Reiten snickered.
I thought about that, he said. You won't be staying here. Tomorrow, I'll take you to a friend of mine, and he'll look after you until I get back.
What if you don't come back? Cho asked, frightened. What if Drakus kills you? Reiten backed off from her, sitting up straight again.
Then I'll tell him.
Reiten paused, seeming unable to go on. He swallowed hard and looked at her.
I'll tell him to take you someplace safe. Somewhere where Drakus will never find you. He won't be able to harm you.
Reiten stood up slowly, then moved over to a chair, sitting in it and going silent.
You should rest.
Cho stared at him. She opened her mouth to say something, but then decided against it. She stared at the ceiling, deep in thought. She closed her eyes for just a second, but as soon as she did, she fell right asleep. Cho was woken up a few hours later by a soothing sound within the room. She opened her eyes to see that it was very dark. The only light in the room was that cast by the moon through the window, and 2 or 3 candles near the chair that Reiten was sitting in. Cho watched Reiten, noticing his lips moving as he stared off into space. She realized that the soothing sound was Reiten singing quietly. He looked very sad for some reason. Cho closed her eyes, not wanting him to know she was awake, and tried to listen to what he was singing about.
I'm sitting in the darkness, and the only thing I see is my own sunken reflection staring back at me. My world is deserted, except for my tears of blood. All my happiness has dropped and is dying in the mud. For all the bruises on my back and all the cuts on my throat comes down to the painful words of this song that I wrote. But what hurts most of all is the loneliness in my heart. All of this pain and torment is tearing me apart.
Cho listened to this sad, beautiful song, trying hard not to cry. Reiten's voice was the most beautiful thing she's ever heard, but as he continued with his song, she couldn't help but feel that a voice like his shouldn't be singing about something like pain, loneliness, and torment. She turned over to face the window, and Reiten's singing stopped. Cho could feel his eyes on her, and she hoped he didn't know he had woken her. Cho was relieved when he began to sing softly once more. Cho slowly began to fall asleep again, but she couldn't control the warm tears streaming from her eyes. Cho awoke once more, but this time it was morning. The white light shone through the window, as if there was really a sun lighting this world. Cho sat up and looked around. Reiten was nowhere to be seen, but she heard the sound of a shower and knew he was only in the bathroom. Cho hopped out of the bed. The energy she had lost the day before had returned. She went over to where Reiten had set all of her clothes and tried to find something that wouldn't show her off so much. Failing miserably, she found a tight and very short vinyl dress. It was black, but had little red vinyl bows in certain places that Cho couldn't help but admire. She began to undress, then, with difficulty, slid into the dress. Reiten came out into the room and paused, seeing Cho just as she managed to zip up the dress in the back. Cho stared at him, blushing and trying to make the dress look longer. Reiten laughed and shook his head, moving over to his dresser and finding a shirt. Cho glared at him. "You know," she said angrily, "in order to live here comfortably, I kind of need some real clothes, not some weird sex fetish lingerie." Reiten paused again, then burst out into laughter, which made Cho blush again and glare even more. He walked over to her and attempted to comb out the knots in her hair with his fingers.
In this world, sex fetish lingerie is real clothing. I told you that.
Cho made a frustrated noise. "I hate you," she muttered, looking away from him. Reiten's smile fell for about a second, but when Cho looked back up at him, it returned.
Hate me if you want, but I'm saving your skin right now.
He moved away from her.
In fact, I'm risking my life and yours just trying to save 500,000 skins.
Cho blinked, then remembered their plan. We're going, then? Reitan nodded.
I'll be taking you to my friend, he said. And then I'll go to try and reason with Drakus.
Cho frowned, remembering that Reitan had once told her that it was foolish to try and reason with a demon. Reitan turned back to her and raised his eyebrows.
You okay?
Yes, she said quickly. Let's just get this over with. Reitan opened a portal and gently grabbed Cho's hand, and they walked through it.